Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and the guys who drive the stories. And here we are at the University Club here in UWA in Crawley. And I've got Allan Kelly back here with Miramar Resources, whose code is M2R, market cap around 8.4 million, and a cash balance at this point in time about 4.3 million. So, look, Allan, welcome to Coffee with Samso. And look, coming off a good race, let's hear what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, we were at RIU in Sydney last week presenting, and we had a booth and we were talking to a lot of people. And before that, we announced we just did a capital raising. We did a small placement of about $2.4 million before costs. And the reason that we did that is that, over the last 18 months since listing, we've done a fair bit of work at our Gidji project north of Kalgoorlie, and it's been successful in that we've defined all these targets with air core drilling, but really the next step there is to do RC and deeper drilling there to really work out what's going on in the bedrock. And we'd raised about $8 million in our IPO, and after the costs of the IPO and everything, we started with about $6.5 million. And so we were down to about $2 million, and basically we could have put that whole $2 million against Gidji. But that would mean all the other projects would suffer, the Glandore and Whaleshark and all those things. So we decided that it was probably time to do a top-up for Gidji. And so we did a placement. We had a number of new shareholders come in, which was great. The placement was done at 17 cents. It was a pretty modest discount at the time we did it. Those guys that took part in the placement get some options as well that were priced at 25 cents. And we're also doing a rights issue for shareholders as well. I think the record date for that's going to be like the 20th of June, and that's being done through an option, a 1 cent option. So the idea behind that is that if you're not a shareholder today, you've still got time to buy some shares, and then you can take up your options as well. Okay. And there'll be a 1 cent option with a 25 cent exercise price. So we're sort of in the middle of that rights issue at the moment. But yeah, basically the whole idea of doing the raising was to be able to ramp up the drilling at Gidji. So we've got about 25,000 metres of air core, about 5,000 to 10,000 metres of RC, and some diamond drilling as well that will come out of that sort of $2 million that we've put towards the Gidji project.
Okay. I mean, the race is good timing, I guess. We sort of discussed that. And
yeah, very good
with
timing.
Our the times last week, over last week, I think your market cap's 8.4 million plus, 4.3 million cash in the bank. It's probably, in hindsight, a good move.
Obviously we didn't know what was going to happen with the ASX, and our share price had been sort of moving up on some reasonable volume. We got to 9.5 cents or so. So the 17 cent placement was a pretty, modest discount, about 5-6% discount. So that we thought that was pretty good timing. And also doing it before the RIU conference last week meant that we could go to the conference and, basically fully funded to do the work that we want to do. So that was, I guess, the idea behind the timing. Now, as I said, we didn't know what was going to happen to the ASX last week, and we've been, treated pretty badly along with just about everyone else on the ASX. So, in hindsight, it was a good thing that we got that placement away when we did.
Yeah, I mean, that just shows the volatility of the ASX, and hindsight investment always works. So, look, let's get into that project, the projects you have. I mean, we talked about Gidji, and I like Gidji. It has a lot of potential. Can be kind of a deceiving type of project. Yep. Being an exploration geologist, as we've always discussed, is that we're always optimists. We all think it's half glass full.
Yeah.
But that optimism can cause some sort of misunderstanding in how we think, right?
Yeah.
Because from my point of view, you got extensive strike mineralization, great.
Yeah.
Series of high or low to high grade spectral grades, but then you don't have those deep intercepts that we would see.
Yeah.
How do you narrate that to, say, a group of guys who understand that potential, a group of guys that says, great, but intercept's not flash, and then those that don't understand what 50 metres at XYZ grades mean.
I guess the first thing I would say is you have to look at the location first. So the location of the project, of where it sits. You know, it sits on a major regional structure just outside Kalgoorlie. So, you know, if you were dreaming of a project that you want to get your hands on, you want to be, what we say, you know, under the head frame, so to speak. You know, you're next to one of the richest patches of dirt on the planet, and you're on a structure coming out of that patch of dirt. And by the dirt, I mean the super pit. So we're on this structure, we're close to a deposit, and then you want to look at, you know, the amount of previous work that's been done there. And in our case, it had been minimal, like almost zero work, which was quite, you know, unbelievable, I guess. And when we first looked at it, we went, oh, surely this ground has been drilled over, because it's in between, you know, the super pit and Paddington and Canada Belt, and it's on the highway. It's got the Goldfields Highway running over the top of it. So you look at it and go, okay, well, what's been done previously? And when you stripped out all the work that, you know, was ineffective, you're basically starting from scratch. So this is the bit that I guess I've been trying to get across to people, that don't assume that because it's right next to Kalgoorlie that it's been well explored before, because it hasn't. It's a greenfields project on the outskirts of Kalgoorlie. So, you know, a lot of the work that we've done so far has been working up the targets. I think we're up to about 730 air core holes, and over a very small area. You know, the whole strike length of the project's about 15 k's end to end, and we've really only worked in about a 4k strike length bit, which is Marylebone and the surrounding bits of that. By comparison, I think we've done 20 RC holes, but those 20 RC holes were done in one fence, in a stratigraphic fence, to basically look at the bedrock geology. We weren't really drilling those RC holes to hit mineralisation. We were doing it to basically put a fence line across, you know, perpendicular to the geology, so we could actually understand the geology. So we hoped we might get some hits, but it was really, we want to see the geology and see what's going on. So the way I sort of explain it to people is, the majority of work we've done is the air core. We've done a tiny little bit of RC. So how I explain that is like, we're looking for a nuclear submarine. Okay, so the deposit is a nuclear submarine. Now, if you're looking for a nuclear submarine in the ocean, it's pretty small, right? And if you try and go drilling for the nuclear submarine, you'll go broke. But luckily, nuclear submarines give off radiation. So you're looking for that plume around the deposit. So the air core drilling is the shallow drilling looking for that plume that then helps you focus in to go on the deeper target. And if you look at the three sort of main targets that we've outlined so far, you've got Marylebone, and you've got Blackfriars, and then you've got Highway. It's like a progression. You know, we've done a fair bit of drilling at this one. We've done first pass at this one, and we haven't even drilled that yet. We've just finished drilling that one. So you're sort of working up each of these targets with this wider spaced air core drilling, so then you can then go in with a deeper drilling, and that's where we're at the moment. So I get the feeling that people think that the numbers that we get in the air core are the grade of the deposit. They're not. They're the sort of the vectors to bring you in close. We haven't hit the deposit yet. We're still drilling the sort of the plume above the deposit. One of the things that makes, or two of the things that make life a bit complicated at Gidji is you've got a stripped weathering profile. So when we talk about a stripped weathering profile, normally when you have regolith in WA, you have your fresh rock, and then, you know, millions of years ago it started weathering and weathering and weathering, and so you get this sort of oxidised zone on top of the fresh rock. And in a normal weathering profile, you get what's called a plume, so that any gold that's in the bedrock sort of goes and mobilises out, and you get a big sort of mushroom, and that gives you a nice wide target to use to focus in. But at Gidji, that profile's been stripped. So we only get a couple of metres of weathered material above the bedrock. So our target is quite narrow because it's been stripped off. So it means your drilling's got to be close together. The other thing is that there's this layer of transported material and a paleo channel sitting over the top of that bedrock. So we have to drill through 40, 50 metres of transported material that's barren, that's got nothing to do with the stuff underneath it, to actually get down to the stuff we're interested in. And then if we're lucky, we get a couple of metres of it. So when we first started drilling there, we were drilling at sort of 400 metre line spacing by 100 metre hole spacing, and you get a couple of sniffs, and then we go back and we fill that into like 200 metre line spacing by 50 metre drill spacing, and they'll get better. And so when our first hits were sort of like 0.5 grams to a gram at the bigger spacing, and then we went to 200 by 50, we were getting 1 to 3 grams, and then in some places we're down to sort of 100 by 25, and now we're getting 5 grams and 8 grams and 13 grams. But that's still not the actual ore body. That's the air core sort of smoke or the plume above the bedrock. So we still really haven't tested the bedrock potential yet, because we were worried that early on we did a couple of RC holes because there were rigs available, and we drilled underneath, a couple of sort of 1-2 gram hits, and we didn't get much. And then we went back and did air core, and it's like where we drilled the hole, the air core hits were better over here. So we were a bit worried that we'd sort of go chasing our tail a bit all over the place. So I've said a couple of times to people, it's like you've got like half a dartboard. So you're looking at half a dartboard and trying to work out where the bullseye is. And then you did a hole, and then you did more air core drilling here, and actually went, oh, the bullseye's over here a bit. So it's been a bit frustrating that we haven't really focused in yet. I think the last air core program we did at Marylebone, I think that is really giving us some good targets now. Blackfriars is earlier. We were just done the second phase, and we're waiting on results from that. And then Highways, the first phase has just been done. So there's sort of like a progression of these targets. So to try and put it succinctly, we haven't hit the bedrock yet, right? The bedrock target, we've got about 2 kilometres of gold anomalism in air core at Marylebone, over 0.5 gram, over 1 gram. But the actual deposit, something like a Paddington, for instance, might only be a few hundred metres long. And the Paddington dolerite, which hosts the majority of the gold mineralisation at Paddington, is 30 metres wide. So if you're drilling holes 50 metres apart and you've got a strip weathering profile, then you might not see that unless you actually put a hole right on top of it. So that's why we're thinking we need to probably go down to 25 metres in some places to see if we can actually hit one of those bedrock hits. So
what you're saying is your challenge of using your nuclear submarine example is all that radiation plume has actually been taken away, and you may actually have to drill on top of the sub to hit it.
Yeah, so some of it's been taken away, it's been stripped off, but there is still some. Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is, we have if you imagine that plume comes up like this, so if you've got a full profile, the plume's this big, but if the profile's been stripped off to here, it's only this big. So you're still looking for the plume, but the plume's been made smaller by the fact that the regolith's been stripped off. So it's drill intensive. It's not as straightforward as just going out and banging an RC hole. And you've got to actually work out where to put the RC hole first. If you go too early with RC or diamond drilling, you can spend a lot of money and not find anything. So you've got to be systematic, you've got to try and not panic. It's a good model. In our latest presentation, I've got a nice little cartoon which compares what we see at Marylebone with some work that Wally Witt did, and you can see it looks exactly like Paddington, it looks exactly like Mount Charlotte, it looks exactly like Randall's. Those are pretty good prizes, so we just don't want to panic and go crazy with RC drilling until we actually worked out the target properly. And a good example of that is like with Blackfriars. When we started drilling across that, we said, okay, look, it looks like there's a mafic sediment contact here, and that's a good spot for a gold deposit. And the drilling was 400 by 100. It was their first pass drilling, but we had 1 gram hits at 100, 400 metre spacing along this thing for a kilometre. So then we've just gone back 3 weeks ago and we've done the infill. We've done the 200 by 50. Now, when we've done that 50 metre drilling, we've now seen that in between the mafic and the sediment is a little porphyry intrusion, because now we've got the resolution at 50 metre, not 100 metre. Now that is even better. So having that nice little rigid body in between those two rock types, that's a really good target. It was already a pretty good target, but now it's even better. So that's a good example of how the resolution of the drilling can make a little bit of difference. And if you just went at 400 by 100 and then started peppering that with RC holes, you could drill a lot of RC holes and not find anything. But now we're sort of focused in on a bit of an area where we've got this intrusion. We haven't got the results yet. And then we went to highway, which was a historic auger anomaly from 25 years ago that's never been drilled. And we looked at that and went, well, that looks a bit like Blackfriars. So we just did the first pass 400 by 100 where we could, because the road sort of goes through the middle. Well, guess what? We got the same. We got a contact and we've got a little intrusion on that contact. So I'm really hoping that there'll be gold numbers in that as well. So now you've got 3 of these parallel things. This is the most advanced at Marylebone. This has sort of had second pass and this has got first pass. But this is why I've been saying for a while that I think there's a camp scale opportunity here.
I mean, when we talk about Gidji, obviously the price can be very big, which we can talk about a bit later down.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think Gidji needs to wake investors up? What is that? Well, drill hole, whatever. What is that?
Yeah, it's the bedrock intersections. I'm still loath to call it a discovery, because to me a discovery is an economic grade and width intersection. And at the moment, whilst we've got some really good numbers, a metre at 11.8 and a couple of metres at 7 and a couple of metres at 5 and a metre at 8, these are all 1 metre air core hits at the base of the transported material, top of the weathered zone. So that's not the ore body. We need to get an RC hit that goes beneath it. And, I guess my rule of thumb is 50 gram metres is something that is potentially economic, depending on the depth, but a 50 gram metre hit, so 50 metres at 1 or 20 at 2 or something like that, is I'd start going, okay, this is a potential ore body, and that's what it needs. I think people are not valuing where we are in the process, and I get that, but you don't get the amount of gold that we've got in the air core without some source to it, some bedrock source to it.
You seem to have a lot of smoke. Is that what you're trying?
Well, it's more than smoke.
Yeah.
We've got a kilometre long at like plus 2 grams, with a lot of 5 gram hits in there. So it's more than smoke. Smoke in air core is like 1/4 to a gram. This is more than smoke. I mean, we've even, I don't know, it's a bit of a red herring, but we've even looked at it and gone, could this actually even be like a supergene deposit? So Panglo, up the road near Paddington, that was a supergene deposit. So it was no bedrock to it, but it was still like 140,000 ounce supergene deposit. Yeah. So, I mean, we could have something like that, but we haven't looked at that because that's not the prize.
Yeah.
The prize is a big bedrock deposit.
Okay. So would that be, I guess that could lead to the answer to my next question, was I was going to say, what can Gidji be? Worst case scenario, sort of okay case, and best case scenario.
Well, I reckon worst case scenario is you could have one deposit that's a few 100,000 ounces, right?
Yep.
That's worst case scenario. And
economic resource.
Yeah, economic, a couple 100,000 ounces. And if you compare it to something like Andy Well, the initial resource at Andy Well was 250,000 ounces. And it was only a strike length of about 200 metres because of the grade. Yep. So you could easily fit something that's a couple 100,000 ounces at a reasonable grade at Gidji. That's sort of worst case, I think. I wouldn't be very happy with that. It'd be okay. You'd do a deal with someone and you'd probably mine it as part of one of the other existing guys, but that would be I think it'd be an okay outcome for where our company is, but I think I'd be disappointed with that. I really think that the prize there is a camp, right? We've only tested that middle sort of third of the project. We haven't even tested Barara North yet, and that's got the same geology as Marylebone, okay? So I've sort of been saying to people that I guess the comparison would be a Bardock, or Bardock's probably the best example because it's in the same structure and it's only just north, 50 k's north of us or something. But at Bardock, there's a couple of main deposits. Aphrodite, it's 1.7 million ounces. I think Excelsior is about 0.8 million ounces or something like that. But I got a hold of a good document, and it shows that there's about 15 different deposits at Bardock, all different geology, all different structure, different scales. I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a camp at Gidji. And camps will normally have a big deposit, some smaller ones, and some ones that are not economic. And so I think that's the potential there. So we've already got 3 things that look like with further drilling they could turn into deposits. Marylebone, Blackfriars, and Highway. And again, that's still in that little middle bit. We haven't looked at Barara North. We haven't looked at the jog further south. 8 Mile, the extension thing to Runway. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a camp. We're looking for, I think, what's the total? The total resource at the Bardock camp is about 3 million ounces, I think, maybe a bit more, 3.5 million ounces. And as I said, there's a couple of big deposits, Aphrodite and Excelsior, and then there's some smaller ones. And Paddington is the same. Paddington's not one deposit. Paddington's about 10 deposits, That's the potential we've got at Gidji. But we've just started. Some of these things, like Bardock, has got 20, 30 years of history. Paddington was discovered Paddington was discovered in like 82 or something. Yeah. We've been there 18 months. And the other thing is, most of those other projects were big company projects. So they were just pumping money at it, drilling and drilling and drilling. We've just started. We've been there 15 months, 18 months. We've done 700 air core holes. We've done 20 RC holes, and most of them are in one section. We've done 3 diamond holes. It's really the beginning of the process. And so what the challenge for us is to do the systematic exploration work to uncover this thing, and be patient and systematic and work through the targets. And that's a really frustrating thing for the market a lot of the time. But having the money means we can do it.
Yeah. I guess, the market needs to be taught or to be led to understand that I have this saying, mineral exploration is not an overnight process.
No.
It is a long process, and most of the major finds that we have has felt like it's overnight because they've just taken it from someone who's been working on it for a much longer time.
Yeah.
And that so.
Well, even De Grey. So I put a slide in one of my presentations a while ago, and it was an air core snapshot that De Grey had about Hemi. I think it was from April 2020, and it's just the air core when they were drilling Falcon and Yukon on that. And if you look at the size and the shape and the tenor of the air core anomalies at Hemi back in April 2020, they're very similar to what we see at Marylebone. So if anyone wants to go look at that, and it's a very good comparison. Now the difference is they went in hard with RC, and that was the key. And so that's the turning point, right? Going from that air core drilling to the RC drilling. We haven't done that yet because we're still trying to flesh out the edges of the thing because we haven't closed it off yet. So, but as I said, we've got the money. We can accelerate the drilling now. We can sort of spend the money on that drilling at Gidji without neglecting our other projects now.
If you have that thought, and you in your presentation at RU, you had this diagram of the Barara Shear. Yeah. You had the Super Pit, you had Canal Bell, and you had Paddington there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you look at that, you can't help but think that, you could be, as he's talking about, that camp style thing, right? So when you look at it, how do you feel about that thought that you could be you're that close, you could be this? Does that keep you awake at night?
Yeah, it does. Like, I've done 3 IPOs, and obviously Dore was really successful on the back of Andy Well. And in the lead up to the placement, a couple of people saying, well, how does this compare to Dore or whatever? I said, well, these projects that we've got in Miramar are better than what we had in Dore. Now, Andy Well was a special case. It was, something I'd worked on with Western Mining, and Western Mining had basically walked away from the project because it didn't meet the economic threshold of Western Mining, which was a huge company, but also other things had happened. Marbo had come in, everyone was heading off to West Africa. So it was a special case where they just walked away from walk-up drill targets. But Andy Well was only ever going to be a narrow, high-grade underground mine with a very short mine life. And it was basically, there was a couple of lodes, but it's really one deposit. There's no other deposits outside the main Wilbur duty lodes, right? That's a lot different to what we see at Gidji, So I want to, as an exploration geologist, without sort of putting it too bluntly, I don't want to stuff Gidji up because I'm being driven by some external market forces. I look at it and go, this is a great project, this has got huge potential. I talk about in the real estate sort of analogy, so it's like the cheapest house on the best street. It's got the most, renovation potential, if you like, It's got minimal value at the moment, but the potential value of it is huge with the work, with the systematic work. And there's always this temptation to go for the low-hanging fruit and try and get the numbers to keep the market happy. But that's a very short-term view. And as we see, this week someone will like gold, and then next week someone will really like lithium, and then someone will like tungsten, and then someone will like this. And if you keep chasing all these short-term things, you get distracted from actually the main game, which is working out what the potential is of the project. So we've just got to stick to the knitting, I guess, is the terminology, and work through the targets, work them up so that we can test them, and be systematic about it. I think this is a great opportunity for the company. Again, use the comparison with a Bardock. They found, a couple of decent deposits there, got taken out for 150 million by someone that wants to develop their projects. Apollo had about just over 1 million ounces, a long way out of Kalgoorlie, and they got taken out. They had a bidding war. I think they got taken out for 180 million. So if we can even prove up 1 million ounces at Gidji that are economic, then potentially, we're a takeover target at that same sort of price. And with a market cap of 10 million.
8 today.
Well, 8 today. You look at it, 10 bag, whatever. But what the thing that frustrates me about the market at the moment is that it seems like people want the discovery valuation on a company without the discovery. They want to get that valuation just by talking about it. And I realise that you actually have to do the work and you have to make the discovery. You can't just say, oh, we think it's there. You have to find it. So that's what we got to do.
When we look at Gidji, we've talked extensively, and there's a good reason why. I think it's one of those projects that are very underrated.
I agree.
We talked with Galileo Mining, and we talked the same thing. They had many hits and misses, and we just talked about stayed on track. And Brad and his team has potentially could pull off a new province down there.
That's really good.
That's kudos to them, because that's what you guys are all about, right? The ones that chase it. So with Gidji at this point in time, obviously we talked about all these things. Have you got a model in mind, or you're thinking, have you got enough information to say, guys, I think this could be the style?
Well, yes and no. I've got a model in mind. The model for Marylebone is Paddington, and then the model for Blackfriars is Aphrodite, and the model for Highway is probably something similar. But a model by itself doesn't make a deposit. You got to test the model and work it out. But
you test it out after you discover it.
well, and I did this paid gold lunch the other week, and I was sitting next to Andy Beckwith from De Grey, and you're saying, you have to be a bit careful of models. Models are good to a point, but you also have to be careful of them. These guys have made this discovery up in the Pilbara, which, according to a lot of smart people at Western Mining, say is got no gold there.
Yeah.
So the models are great, but they also can restrict you to a view. Tropicana. The reason that Tropicana was found by IGO is because Western Mining said it's the wrong rocks, right? So
Gold Road's got the
Gold Road's same.
gold.
Yeah, it's wrong part of the Yilgarn or whatever, wrong rocks, or Julmar, wrong rocks, right? But as a geochemist for a long time, it was good. I got to be very empirical, and what I mean by that is I wasn't focused so much on the model. I was focused by what the data was telling me. So if we do a soil sampling program, we've got a gold anomaly. We go, hey, there's a gold anomaly. We've got to follow it up. Someone else might say, oh, it's the wrong rocks, it's the wrong part. It's like, hang on, you can't ignore this, right? So models are good in that. I guess I said the other day, I said, you've got to have enough experience to recognise the similarities. So the similarity between Marylebone and Paddington, or between Blackfriars and Aphrodite. But the reason that deposit hasn't been found yet is just because it's slightly different to that one.
Yeah.
So you've got to recognise the similarities, but also be open to the differences. So, Malina, De Grey, Hemi, looks like this, but it's different because it's in the Pilbara. Or it's different because it's related to granites, because it's intrusion related. But that's similar to something else, right? It's similar to something in Alaska, or it's similar to something in Nevada. So you've got to be in the right place at the right time, with the right project, and then recognise the similarities, and then get out there and test it. But then not be too driven by the model. I think we've got a fantastic opportunity at Gidji, and some part of me a lot of times goes, we should get rid of all our other projects and just focus on Gidji, because that is a good enough project for a company to have by itself. But we've got all these other projects, which we'll talk about in a minute, we haven't tested yet, and I really hate picking something up because of a really good idea and then not testing it before we get rid of it. Because guarantee, if you get rid of it before you've tested it, the next guy is going to come along and find it, and you're kicking yourself. So I don't want to do that either. So there's this balance.
Yeah, I made a conscious effort today that this session of Coffee Samso is going to keep going until I'm finished talking because your projects are unique in a sense, and I get what you're saying, because I think we think the same, is that they're all such great potential. It's just you're limited by time and money.
You can't do everything.
You can't do everything, as we all know, right? Which is probably a good time for us to go to Glandore, because Glandore is, again, you've come up and said, look, I've got this footprint, right?
Yep.
And my question to you is, how are you going to deal with this footprint? Because it is a footprint. Footprint is very green grass, early stage, right?
But there's two parts to Glandore, right? So very high level, I say to people that Glandore could be as good, if not better, than Gidji. Gidji is a better location, and we've talked about that, Bra and Shear and stuff. But Glandore's actually got better historic results, okay? But it's a bit more logistically challenging because it's on the salt lake. So, you can't just go out. Yeah, you just can't go out there and drill like you can at Gidji.
Yeah.
It's not that far from Kalgoorlie. It's only 40 k's from Kalgoorlie. Yeah. But all the interesting stuff's on the salt lake, so you need a special rig to get out there. So there's two parts to Glandore. There was a lot of air core drilling on the lake, which looked interesting. There was a little bit on the land just south of the lake. There's some old Western mining holes that looked interesting. But then out to the east, there's a thing called Glandore East, and it's on the edge of this granite. It's the same sort of granite that you see at Majestic to the south. And there's some diamond drilling that Harmony did back in 2005 on the edge of the lake. And they were very wide spaced diamond holes. The thing is, on the salt lake, especially back then, you're limited to what drilling you can do. You normally do air core drilling or RAB drilling, and then you go straight to diamond drilling. Because in the old days, you couldn't really take an RC rig out on the lake because they're too heavy with the boosters and compressors and all that. So you basically go with your air core and then you go to diamond drilling. So they did some diamond holes on the edge of this granite, and they got hits like 4 metres at 40 grams, only 80 metres below the surface. And then they go 200 metres north and drill and get a few metres at 8 or whatever. But then that was it. And then that project went through all these different companies, and then Anglo Gold Ashanti got hold of it, and they went out, this is 2018, and they went and drilled a couple of holes and went, oh, it's too small for us. And that's it, right? So it hasn't been followed up. Those diamond holes are wide spaced. Now you can do RC drilling on the lake as well if you can get hold of a rig. Glandore, I've said to people, Glandore East is more like Andy Well. The size and scale and grade of that is more like Andy Well, and the fact that a big company has just walked away from walk-up drill target is like Andy Well. So, as I said, there's two parts to the project. There's this granite, and there was all this air core drilling around the eastern side of the granite and where the diamond holes were, and there was a bit of drilling around the western side. So before we rushed out with the diamond rig, we thought, oh, we'll like continue around the western edge of this granite and up to the north and see if we can see the same sort of stuff. And so we did that, and we did that whenever it was December last year or something, and we've got this really big air core footprint on the lakes, about 5 kilometres long. Which, compare that to Marylebone, that's like the whole size of Marylebone, right? But the other thing that was interesting, when we started drilling sort of one of the southern lines across the granite itself, people don't like the granites for gold. But we drilled across the bottom of the granite, and we got all this sulphides, fresh sulphides in the hole. So we had a few metres up our sleeve. So at the end of the program, we were rounding up to the north and we were working our way back down. I said, well, let's just extend a couple of the lines right across the middle of the granite. And when we did that, we got sulphides and we got some reasonable hits in the granite itself. And so then you go, okay, so we've got these hits, high-grade hits on the land down here. We've got these high-grade diamond hits up here. We've got this granite in the middle. And you can actually see stuff going through the granite. When you look at Majestic, where Black Cat are developing, and Trojan and Imperial, they are all hosted in these granites with these northeast trending structures through them. Okay. And that's what we think we've got at Glandore. But to date, all we've done is we've done the first pass air core, and we've got these diamond hits up here that we haven't tested yet. It's very frustrating for me. I want to be out at Glandore tomorrow, but as everyone knows, that getting rigs and getting assay turnaround in WA is crazy at the moment. We're restricted because there's only a limited number of drilling companies that drill on a lake, and there's a even more limited number of diamond rigs that drill on the lake. So we're in the queue for a diamond rig, waiting, and we just have to be ready to go when that rig's available. And then we've got half a dozen holes planned up at Glandore East to follow up those high-grade hits. We had planned to drill that a few months ago, but just haven't been able to get the rig. So we just have to be patient there. It hasn't gone away. The project hasn't gone away. The gold hasn't gone away. We just can't physically get out there and drill it yet. But I'm quite excited about that target. I think it's got potential for some high-grade, narrow high-grade mineralisation, again of a similar sort of size and scale to what we saw at Andy Well. So, and given its location, we're only about 6 kilometres from where Black Cat are building their mill at Majestic. There's an obvious way to monetise it if we do find that. So,
what do you think you get out of that diamond hole? Obviously, that's you're waiting for that. You mentioned that. So, what do you think, or what do you think you want to get, or what can you get out of that diamond hole?
Well, if we do half a dozen holes and we put them in the right place, and the mineralisation links up between holes, you could quite quickly have an inferred resource.
Okay.
Because you actually got bedrock hits. That's different to Gidji, right? If you got a couple of hits that line up between a couple of diamond holes, and you can show that it's the same vein and dip and strike and everything, you can quite quickly put an inferred resource around that. So, and like I said, if you were lucky, you could have something, a couple 100,000 ounces very quickly there with reasonable grade. And again, if it links up and looks good, then you've got a processing plant nearby as well that would easily take it. So it's really frustrating that I feel like, that project's really underdone at the moment, just because we haven't been able to get the rig that we need. So we'll be, as soon as we got it, we'll be out there. We as I said, I think Glandore is as good, if not more exciting than Gidji in some ways, because it's got that mineralisation that you can follow up quite quickly.
Mate, we just spent 45 minutes talking Gidji up, and you've just said that it's better.
Well, I think Gidji's got more opportunities, but the one opportunity at Glandore East is probably more advanced and more.
I get what you're saying. Look, Gidji's got it's Gidji. It's got its thing.
Yeah.
And Glandore's got its thing. So and I think they're the same, and they're mutually exclusive in terms of. But look, I want to move on to Langwell and your other stuff, because we've, in past Coffee with Samso, we haven't talked much about it, but with the renewed interest in rare earths and the government throwing money, incentives into it, are we going to be expecting Miramar to suddenly, this is something we should do? Because look, the reason why I'm making this extra long, because I do think all your projects have real concepts that I like.
Yeah. Well, I'm very conceptually driven, as we've sort of already said, but also empirically driven as well. So Langwell is an interesting project. It's really early stage, but it's in a sort of interesting location. It sits between the deflector belt, the Gulliver belt, in the Murchison and Golden Grove. So there's almost like this sort of triangle where you've got Yalgoo, Deflector and Golden Grove, and then Rothsay's down here a bit, and Langwell is in this bit of a greenstone belt in the middle. It's called the Yalgoo Dome, and it's sort of it's really complexly folded, and it's been uplifted and all this sort of stuff, but completely underexplored. I think the last bit of work, there's only really been 2 bits of work that are done there. Matana did some sampling out there in 88, I think it was, and they got a high grade 16 gram rock chip in the middle of nowhere in this quartz vein, and then didn't do anything more. And then this company called Jervois Mining did some auger drilling in 2010 across the project and got some really big gold anomalies. And then they followed it up, and they did about a dozen air core holes, and most of them not even on our current tenement. There's about 5 or 6 on our current tenement, but they got some rare earths. So they sort of looked at that and said, oh, this looks pretty interesting. And then I dropped it. So that was 2010. And it happened to be open at the time I was looking at it, when I was putting together the Miramar projects. And obviously it was near Deflector, which I knew very well because I built it. So I thought, there was potential for gold here. There was potential for maybe copper gold like Deflector. And then, I thought there may be some rare earth potential. So we haven't done much there. We did a gravity survey in preparation to try and do an air core program. There's a fair bit of outcrop in the northwestern area, but the rest of it's all covered. And if you look at a lot of the maps, the GL survey maps, it's a lot of granite. There's not much greenstone there. So we did a gravity survey to see if we could outline a bit more greenstone, and it looks like there's a bit more than what's mapped. But then, when we were watching all the, I guess I don't want to use the word hoo-ha, but the hoo-ha about rare earths and lithium and stuff. And we started looking at some of the old GL survey data. And there's a whole heap of pegmatites at Langwell that have been mapped but never sampled. So there's about 50 pegmatites just in one area over about a 7 kilometre strike length. And they're all different orientations and stuff. So I thought, okay, well this is sort of interesting. We don't know what's going on there. There's no mention in the notes really of anything apart from the fact that they're pegmatites. They talk about strike and widths and stuff. Yeah, sort of couple of metre widths, but for a pegmatite that's reasonable. Like pegmatites are not normally very wide. There's pegmatites everywhere. So I thought, we'll have a look at this. And then of course you've got all these pegmatites, and then you've got about 5 air core holes on the whole project, and one of them happens to have 4 metres at 1500 ppm total rare earths. So okay, well, it's a lot of gneiss. There's a lot of gneiss there, granitic gneiss. And my limited knowledge of pegmatites, is that the lithium pegmatites tend to be more in the sort of greenstones or sediments next to the granite where they come from. But the rare earth bearing pegmatites seem to be more prevalent in the gneisses, in the gneissic terrain. So I thought, okay, well, let's go have a look at that. So actually we've just had 2 guys out there this week, and they've gone and sampled as many of these pegmatites as they could find, and we're going to get them assayed, we'll do lithium and rare earths just to see what's going on. They've gone and had a look, see if they can find the hole that had the rare earths in it as well. And we really don't know. And in the meantime, I got hold of some regional radiometric data. And radiometric data, is potassium, thorium, uranium. And that can be quite useful in doing this rare earth exploration as well. And what you see when you look at the potassium values over the area is all these linear trends, and it's a different trend to the geology. And so to me, that they look like pegmatites. So there's a whole heap up where the mapped ones are, but there's a whole heap that look like this, sort of just under a bit of thin cover. So if these samples that we put in have any sort of rare earth potential, then there's a whole swarm of these pegmatites up there that have never had any work at all. So it's a left field thing, right? It's not the main focus of the company, but it's nice to have these sort of other things that you can look at, especially if you're like waiting for a rig for Glandore, or you're waiting for the weather to calm down so you can get up to Onslow or somewhere like that. It's good to have these other things that you can quickly go out and have a look at. And it's only about a 3-hour drive from Perth. It's not as close as Julimar, but you can get up there quite quickly, do a couple of days work and get back and not have, not had a huge logistical exercise. So it's interesting.
If you got results back and they're kicking rare earths, you might have a good dilemma.
Yeah.
Which one to go for, right?
You never know. I guess I'm a bit nervous about, like I said, chasing this week's favourite. Because this week's favourite is next week's not favourite. Yeah. But, you can't ignore that stuff. You can't ignore it completely. So we'll just see. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Now, Whaleshark, IOCG.
Yeah.
What I like about it is, IOCG, when you say in the same sentence, you're talking several hundred metres deep. We're talking less than 100. Yeah. So what's your potential thoughts on there? Because I know it's early and you haven't had a chance to go there. But
ICGs are generally big, right? So iron oxide, copper, gold. And, as we know, that the examples of those are things like, Olympic Dam, giant, you got all the ones in South Australia in the Stuart Shelf. So you got Olympic Dam, you got Prominent Hill, you got Carapatina, Hillside as well. And generally these things are under a lot of cover. Olympic Dam is about 300 metres of cover. I think Carapatina is about 400. Prominent Hill was, in the hundreds of metres as well. If you go up to the Eastern Succession in Queensland, where you got Ernest Henry and Eloise and Stara, they've all got a decent bit of cover over them as well. If you look at Javieron, which is questionable whether that's an ICG, but that's got like 400 metres of cover as well. So our Whaleshark project sits on the end of the Capricorn Origin, where it goes under the Carnarvon Basin, and there's some limited drilling that I was actually involved with Western Mining back in the 90s, and the basement depths are only 40 to 100 metres. So obviously that's a great advantage for exploration. The key signatures of ICG deposits, the I, it stands for iron, and that's generally hematite. So these ICGs have big hematite concentrations, which gives you a dense gravity anomaly. So we have got some gravity data there. It's a bit sporadic and it's a couple of different sort of generations. So we're going to do an infill gravity program shortly, hopefully the next couple of weeks. The other signature that you get with ICGs is a whole mix of elements. So copper, gold, uranium, rare earths, moly, tungsten, in varying amounts. And we're using Ernest Henry as the example for Whaleshark. And there's a very good atlas that the Queensland government put out about Ernest Henry. It's got every data set you can imagine: geology, mags, grav, drill hole geochemistry, surface geochemistry. And there's a good little cartoon that I've used in a couple of my presentations that's a cross section through Ernest Henry, and it shows that Ernest Henry's under about 100 metres of cover. At the interface between the cover sequence and the deposit, there's a nice plume of copper, uranium, moly, tungsten, that silver at that boundary. And so we did MMI sampling at Whaleshark. Initially we covered the whole area with 1 kilometre by half kilometre sampling, and we got a couple of nice anomalies at the northeastern end in copper and gold and things. So we infilled them to 250 by 250, and those anomalies got better and stronger. And so what we're going to do now, as I said, we're going to do gravity over that and look for one of these nice gravity anomalies. And then we're going to get an air core rig and we're going to drill down to that interface, the same as they've done at Ernest Henry, and then hopefully use that to focus in that geochem anomalism to something that we can drill test with deeper drilling. So again, it's that systematic process of going from here to here to here before you drill the hole. So, but the prize, these things are big. Olympic Dam's huge. That's an outlier, right? That's a monster. But a typical sort of benchmark for an ISCG deposit is 100 million tonnes at 1% copper, 1 gram gold. That's what you're looking for, So 1 million tonnes of copper. So these things vary. Some are more copper rich, some are more gold rich, some have silver, some have uranium, some don't. But that's sort of the benchmark for like 100 million tonnes at 1% copper, 1 gram gold. And that gives you the sort of size and scale that you need to find. They're all different styles. Carapatina is like a carrot. Ernest Henry is sort of like a shoot that's in some sort of biff and stuff, more like Whaleshark. Prominent Hill is more structurally controlled. It's between a sort of mag anomaly and a gravity anomaly, or mag anomaly and a gravity anomaly, so it's a bit different. So again, it's like what we're talking about before, recognising the similarities and then also potentially the differences. So the plan at Whaleshark, we've got the geochem, now we're going to do the infill gravity and we'll do the drilling, and then hopefully that brings us into something really nice and discrete that then we can test with deeper drilling.
Okay.
So and Onslow, the Onslow project is something that will get as much done as we can over the sort of winter months, and then see where we are by the end. So sort of August, September, see where we are there.
Okay. Bangemall, we talked about that in the last Coffee with Samso.
Yep.
What's your thoughts there?
Well, really, Bangemall is sort of like a proof of concept thing. We've got the land position there. We've got a couple of targets. We've got about 7 tenements there. Only 2 of them are granted, Dooley Downs and Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon didn't have any good geophysics there, so we flew that in January, and we've got a whole heap of late time anomalies that sit on the edge of a dolerite. Again, in my latest presentation, there's a really nice little cartoon showing how these nickel copper PGE things form in a basement. So you've got a basement with some big faults. The dolerite comes up the faults and then sort of spews out over the top of sediments. Okay. And if the sediments have got any sulphur in them, the dolerite picks up the sulphur and then can make sulphides. So the next step there is we've got about 13 late time EM anomalies, and we'll get out in the ground and just do some soil traverses, rock chip traverses across those anomalies, keeping a lookout for any gossans or anything like that. And if we then get any sort of gossans or sulphides or whatever, or nickel copper anomalies, then the next step there is doing EM on the ground. And it's a lot different from doing airborne EM to ground EM. You've got to get people out on the ground laying out loops. So you sort of pick like a postage stamp area and you do it. So if we end up with maybe 2 or 3 areas that we want to do ground EM on, that would be great. And again, it's about proving up the concept. And if we can prove the concept at Mount Vernon, that means all those other targets that we've got are all, a lot more potential than we thought. At ROU, we were talking to a couple of major companies, and they're quite interested. So if we prove up the concept, then the strategy really is to probably find a JV partner to help us progress it,
big brother,
so that we can focus on the other stuff.
Yeah. Look, you know, most of the guys have been watching up to this point. It's probably half asleep. This is a, but look, it's a fantastic series of projects, and I think that alignment that we've done is speaks for itself in terms of prospectivity and what it can be down the road.
I'm a realist, right? We've got how many projects? We've got 10 projects. Not all of them are going to be discoveries. So part of the job of being a geologist is knowing when to walk away from stuff too, right? So, but I hate divesting a project without having tested the concept. So there are a number of projects within our portfolio at the moment that I want to test and then make a decision on, get to a milestone, and then if it's not there, get rid of it. Because we've got some stuff that undoubtedly needs more work and more focus, Gidji, Glandore and that. So our portfolio looks very busy, but a lot of them are not taking up much time at the moment, not taking up much time or money, because we're sort of getting it to a point where we then want to make a decision on it. And you know, Whaleshark and some of the Bangemall things, if we go out there and we test it and it doesn't look like there's something there, we're not going to hang around, we'll move it on. So
yeah, remind guys out there too, you know, Julimar wasn't the primary project either.
No,
so
it wasn't.
It's the concept of testing your thoughts, your gut feel, your theories, and then yours may not be the right one, right? Because you could divest that and somebody else will pick it up and come up with another bright spark and they make that discovery. But it's the satisfaction of making sure you dotted all your I's and cross all your T's, I guess.
Well, Gidji, as I said, I think I said before, like, you could justify our current market cap just with Gidji.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So everything else is free.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree. I think Gidji, that's why I wanted to treat it with a bit more detail today. It's really easily misunderstood because I've spoken to a lot of people and they tend to brush it off, and I'm thinking, you do know Gidji is like right next to Kalgoorlie, right? They don't have to work very hard to get something to be a worst case scenario. You know, and the best case scenario is you find yourself in another one of those camps. So
I've sort of said to a couple of people, given where it is, given the location, given the structure, given the geology, and given the results today, exploration is a lot of times exploration is mostly unsuccessful, right? As we know. But if you look at Gidji, you think it's probably more likely that we will find something than not find something.
Well, you're closer to...
Given all those things, right?
That's right?
It's more likely that you will find something than not find something.
But there's also the possibility you won't, but you're more likely to go that way. So, look, Alan, you know, news flow. You know, what are those guys out there going to be expecting for you? From you, I should say.
Well, we've been busy since listing, and, you know, I've said that a number of times. I'm very proud that we've spent, since listing, about 75% of our cash flow has been on the ground. You know, we don't have a lot of overheads and admin, so we're out there doing work, generating results. As it stands today, we're waiting on results from drilling at Gidji. We're still waiting on some RC results, believe it or not. We're waiting on the air core results from Blackfriars and Highway, and both of those I think are going to be very interesting. We've just had a crew at Langwell this week, as I said, sampling all those pegmatites. Now I'm not sure what the turnaround time on those is going to be, but you know, there could be results coming out from that. We're getting ready to mobilise a gravity crew to Whaleshark in the next few weeks. Now that we've just raised the money, we're having a planning session next week to work out the drill programs at Gidji for the next sort of 6 months or so. And off the top of my head, we've got RC drilling at a couple of targets at Gidji already, at Marylebone already. Yesterday I was finalising some nickel air core drilling at Gidji as well, which I haven't talked about, but we've got nickel sulfide potential there as well. We're waiting on soil sampling results from the jog. So depending on what we get there, we've got RC drilling planned for that as well. And we're going through heritage approvals and things for the Barara North area. And once we get that heritage approval, then we'll have air core drilling there. So there's a fair bit happening at Gidji. As I said, we're getting a gravity crew up at Whaleshark, and we're getting ready for that first air core program up there, which will be sort of June, July. And then sometime in June, July, August, we're going to do a bit of a sampling blitz up at Bangemall, get everyone up there and knock off all this EM anomalies as well. So there's a lot happening. There'll be a lot of news flow.
Yeah.
I'll say keep an eye on the company, because some of the RC drilling that we do at Gidji could be pretty interesting. And we're waiting on a diamond rig.
Yeah.
So whenever we get that Lake Diamond rig for Glandore, we're going to be out there as well. And there's high grade hits there that we're following up. So any one of those could be pretty interesting too.
Okay. Look, Allan, can't go past this last part of the Coffee with Samso where, I asked the question, why Miramar? Shamelessly sell Miramar?
We've got great projects. Obviously we think that the Gidji project is a really fantastic opportunity for the company. We're in a great location there. We've already got some really good results. We've got a whole heap of targets to test there. Any one of those, has got the potential for, million ounce sort of plus, like some of the things you see further up the structure. And then we've got all these other opportunities. We've got some real big company maker opportunities at like Whaleshark and potentially Bangemall as well. And then we've got some sort of, things that you could monetize quickly, things like Glandore as well. So it's a good mix. And also we've got people that have, seen things, discovered things and built things before in the company. And we're out there doing the work. We're spending the money on the ground, testing targets and testing theories and moving on. So, the three things that you want to see in a junior explorer is the people, the projects and the funding. And we've got all three, I believe. So.
Okay.
And we're cheap.
Sorry?
And we're cheap.
Oh, yes, best you say that and not me. But, fantastic, Allan. Again, we've given you coffee, but I've still found a way to shortchange you yet again. We left the coffee that we normally give away to victims of Coffee with Samso. So you're going home empty-handed today.
Right.
So, but again, Allan, thank you for your time.
No worries.
I really wanted to extend the conversation today because I felt that we've been sort of lacking in terms of trying to get the real details of your projects. But look, I encourage you guys to go out there and contact Allan directly because, it is about understanding. And, Allan did make a point, they are closer but potentially closer to a result than not. I guess that's what you meant. But, thank you.
No worries, thanks.